Hey everyone, in this video we'll look at how to add swimming in your game by using the FS swimming system. So here I have a simple scene with a pool in it. So we'll be creating a player and AI character that can swim in this pool. So first let's take a look at the environment. So for the water, I just have two game objects, a water surface, which is just a plane with a custom shader. So the shader that we use here doesn't matter. You can use any shader that you want. Alright. And we also have a water volume, which is just a box collider trigger. Alright, and the layer of both of these game objects is set to water. So when our character enters this trigger, he'll start swimming. Okay, so again, you can replace this water shader with any other shader that you want. Alright, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the layer is set to water for both water volume and water surface. Alright. So let's go ahead and add a character that can swim in this water. So I'll open up the FS systems window, and first just go ahead and click on this import project settings to make sure that all the layers and tags are imported. All right, and then to create the character, I'll click on setup and I'll choose locomotion and swimming. So if you just installed the swimming system asset in your project, you won't see all these other assets, right? So for this tutorial, we are only interested in swimming. So I'll only select locomotion and swimming systems. Okay. So next we can change our character model if you want. So I'll go ahead and change this default character with our character model. All right. And I'll click on the setup button. Okay, that created the character over here. Let me just place him over here. And now if we test the game, our character should be able to swim in the water. So yeah, you can see that once we enter the water, the character will start swimming. And if we press shift while swimming, the character will swim fast. And if we don't press any movement input, the character will tread in the water like this. We should also be able to climb out of the water and also dive into the water. And if you press the C key while swimming, the character will swim underwater. And if you press space, then the character will swim up. Alright. And by the way, when we are underwater, the character's breath will keep decreasing. And once it reaches 0, then his health will keep decreasing. And the character will die once the health becomes 0. Alright. And by the way, if you set up the Ragdoll, it will be activated once the character is dead and the character will go down the pool. So to set up the Ragdoll, you can go to Tools, FS Tools, and open up the Ragdoll setup window. So here I'll assign my player game object and click on Create Ragdoll. So that will create all the Ragdoll colliders for us. So we'll have to adjust these colliders a bit. So if you look at the head bone, here you can see that the collider is not quite right. So you'll have to adjust the radius and offset and all that. Okay. So I'm not going to spend time perfecting the Ragdoll setup in this tutorial. I've already covered that in our other tutorials like the shooter system and all that. Okay. So you can customize a lot of things in this swimming controller. So let's look at the swimming controller and swimming script and see what all we can customize. All right. So let me just make this a bit bigger. And here you can customize how the underwater movement works. So we used the C key to swim downwards and the space key to swim upwards. So you can customize that from here. You can also give it a button in case you're using the controller. And as with all our assets, you can also use the new input system if you want. You can check out the documentation for more information on that. Okay, so another setting that we have here is movement based on camera angle. So some games use a swimming system where you won't have to press the key to swim underwater. You can just point your camera downwards, and once it crosses a threshold, the player will automatically swim underwater, right? So if this is turned on, you don't have to press the C key to swim underwater. So you can enable that if you want. And by the way, all these fields have a tooltip on them. So we should read them if some property is not clear. All right. So next we have the swimming movement settings. So here we can change the swimming speed. So we can change the normal speed, the fast swim speed, underwater speed, rotation speed, and all that. All right. And next we have the breath and health settings. So here we can change how fast the breath should decrease and restore. And we can also define how the damage should be applied when the player is underwater. So you can read this tooltip to understand how all these options work. All right. And then from here, we can also modify the underwater particle effects, sound effects, and all that. Okay. And next we have another script called swimming. So the swimming controller script is just for the player, but the swimming script contains all the settings that are common for both the player and the AI characters. All right. We haven't set up the AI characters yet, but just know that these settings will be common for both the player and the AI characters. So here we can change things like how the swim is detected and all that. So swim offset is the offset that is used to determine if the player is inside water. So you can change it however you want. So if I just play the game and try to walk into the water. And by the way, let me just turn on the gizmo so that you can see the swim offset. This blue spear is the swim offset. And once I cross a certain depth, you can see that the player will start swimming. So that is the swim offset. All right, you can try playing with this value based on your character. And the head offset is used to determine if the character's head is underwater or not. So if the head is underwater, then we'll start decreasing the breath and all that, right? So this is just an offset for that. Again, you can see it's gizmo and you can try playing with it if you want, but the default values should work fine. And then we can set things like the maximum height at which the player can dive and all that. And from here we can also set the common visual and sound effects. All right. The reason why these two sound effects are in the swimming controller script is because the AI cannot swim underwater, right? But all the other settings are required for both the player and the AI. All right. And finally, we have events like on enter water, on exit water, etc., which you can use to run any custom effects or custom logic if you want to extend the system. All right. So yeah, these are all the settings that we have. So next, let's set up an AI character that can swim. So to create an AI character, I'll open up the FS Systems window and under setup, I'll change this pickup from player to AI. All right. And I'll choose the swimming AI here. Again, you won't see all these options if you if you don't have those assets installed. And for the AI character, I'll just choose this red variant. All right, and I'll click on setup. Okay, so let me just bring him over here. So now for any AI characters to be able to move in Unity, we have to set up a nav mesh surface, right? So I'll go to AI and set up a nav mesh surface. All right, but before baking this, we have to configure the nav mesh for the water, right? If we didn't have water, we could just bake this directly, but since we have water, we have to do some extra settings for the AI to be able to swim. So the problem is, if I just bake it like this, then the AI will just walk on this water. So what we have to do is, in our water game object, we have to create another plane below our water surface that will act as a navigation mesh for our AI character. All right. So what I'll do is I'll just duplicate our water surface, and let me just call this water nav mesh. All right. And we can just disable the other water surface and water volume so that we only have the water nav mesh. So this is the plane that will be used as the navigation mesh of our AI. So we don't need to have a water shader and all for this plane. We can just use a normal lit shader. All right. And we have to position it so that it is below our water surface. So to find this offset value, what we can do is we can look at the height of our nav mesh agent of the AI character. So it's 1.73. So with trial and error, I found that subtracting 0.6 to this value will give us the offset that we should use for the nav mesh. Okay, so 1.73 minus 0.6 will give us minus 1.13. All right, so this offset will make sure that the character's neck is above the water when swimming. All right, so next we have to add a nav mesh modifier to our water nav mesh so that our agent can understand that this is a different kind of nav mesh area and they have to swim when they are in this nav mesh. So here I'll add a nav mesh modifier component to our water nav mesh. All right, and I'll check our ride area and I'll change the area type to water. All right, so now with our water nav mesh enabled and with our water surface and water volume game objects disabled, we can go ahead and bake our nav mesh. So note that it's really important that the water surface and water volume is disabled while baking our nav mesh because we don't want to have an nav mesh over there. All right. So here I'll also go ahead and click on generate links so that it will create links for the AI to dive from the land to water. All right. And I'll go ahead and click on bake. Okay. So that created the nav mesh, and you can see that the color of this nav mesh on the land is blue and the nav mesh on the water is yellow because those two are different nav mesh areas. Okay, and we have nav mesh links generated here so that the AI can dive from here to the water. All right, so now with the nav mesh baked, we can go ahead and disable the mesh renderer of our water nav mesh plane, and then we can go ahead and enable our water surface and water volume. And by the way, let me also change the shader of this back to water. I just changed it to default just to show you that our water nav mesh doesn't need that shader. All right. So now when we run the game, our AI character should follow us into the water. All right, so you can see that the AI is following us to the water. And one thing to note is that the AI doesn't have the underwater ability, so they won't be able to follow us underwater. So yeah, the swimming ability of AI is pretty basic, but if you want an AI character that will follow you to the surface of the water, then you can go ahead and use it. And by the way, another thing I want to show you is that we can apply a post-processing effect when the camera is underwater to make it feel like we are actually underwater. So for that, what you can do is you can create a post-process volume and attach it to the swimming controller script over here in the underwater effect prefab field. So when we assign it over here, the post-processing will only be applied when the camera is underwater. So by default, we have a simple post-processing effect here. So this prefab just has a post-process volume where we change the color to a bit of a bluish color and add a little bit of a blur by using a depth of field effect. So right now the reason why we are not seeing this post-processing effect is because to be able to see it, we have to attach the post-process layer script to our camera, and we'll just change the layer to everything. All right, so now we are underwater. The post-processing should be applied. So let's try testing the game. So you can see that when the camera is underwater, the post-processing is applied. And if we take the camera above the water, then the post-processing is disabled. All right. So another thing I want to show you is that you can make physics objects sink in the water by adding a script onto the water volume key object. So you can use this to create moments like an enemy character sinking after being ragdolled. So to make it work, first we have to add a script called object sink handler to our water volume. All right. And then here we can assign the sound and visual effects for ripple and all that. So let me just assign something. Okay. And now I'll just add a cube with a rigid body so that we can see it falling onto the water and sinking. So let me add a cube. All right. I'll just place it over here and I'll increase its Y by a lot. And I'll also add a rigid body onto it. Okay. So now when we test the game, the cube should fall onto the water and then sink slowly in it. So yeah, you can see that it's working fine. The cube is slowly sinking into the water since it's a rigid body. So you can also do the same with player and enemy characters after activating Ragdoll and all that. So as with all the other FS system assets, this one comes with a built-in integration with the other systems like Parkour, melee combat, swimming, and all that. So you can go ahead and integrate these systems together in a single click. So if you have these assets, then try combining them and try to build something cool. And we'd love to see the things that you build with these assets. So be sure to share them in the showcase section of our Discord server. So yeah, that's all for the tutorial. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.